Welcome back to TechWise. This is season 1, episode 4 of the series, where we provide expert insights into technology solutions leveraging the wisdom of Greenleaf and the perspectives of thought leaders in our extended ecosystem. We have a very exciting session for you today where we're going to be talking about maximizing cloud data value without breaking your budget. This is a topic that's been, on my mind for a little while. I've got someone that's joining me today that is a really good close friend of mine. It's interesting. A lot of you know that I worked at Snowflake for several years before I joined Greenleaf. The guy who hired me there, a guy named Todd Beauchesne, was kind of changed my life. I guess you guys know that, Snowflake had the largest software IPO in history, and it was kind of life-changing. And Todd brought me on to Snowflake, so I owe him a debt of gratitude. And I just really want to introduce a lot of you to my friend Todd Beauchesne. Todd, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Craig?
I'm doing fine. Todd and I met back in 2017. Todd at the time was a member of the number one sales team at Snowflake for a number of years. As a matter of fact, on the early days, Todd drove significant value and a lot of customer use cases as a technical expert before joining the alliances team, actually opening up the alliances team and the technical team that reported to the alliances team. Todd was responsible for that team, and he brought me on as the very first technical resource that worked in the partner organization, which is now classified as a partner sales engineer. So I was very first one. Todd brought me in, and it was good to meet Todd. Todd is a very, very intelligent guy. I mean, I'll tell you, I used to get imposter syndrome sitting around you most of the time, Todd, when we talked. You had a storied history before you joined Snowflake, and I really wanted to let the audience learn a little bit more about you. Introduce yourself. Talk about what you've done in the data world.
Well, thanks, Craig, and you're too kind in your words for me. But I started as a CS student, just kind of taking classes at the 400 level, and we had at the university where I went, Brigham Young University, we had a databases course, and we had a visiting professor from China, and he was teaching us about SQL and something about SQL. Like, I love programming. We mostly did Java and C in that program. But as I got into SQL, the way that SQL represents data really resonated with me. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed that class. And so when I got my first job a year later, I got a company that was operating on a database. It actually happened to be Sybase at the time.
Ah, yes.
But I became kind of the expert on writing complex queries whenever we ran into a data problem. And so just kind of moved from there, and then picked, as I moved forward, jobs that led me down that road of doing more and more around data and SQL, and ultimately landing at Amazon as a business intelligence engineer, which is where Snowflake found me. I don't think if I hadn't been at Amazon, I don't think Snowflake would have found me. But obviously, we had a great run together at Snowflake, and really, it's about helping organizations take advantage of all this new data that's available.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Yeah, it was funny you mentioned Sybase. Sybase doesn't get a lot of credit for what it did, but the early stages of replication, man, Sybase just did it right, man. I remember using it way back in the day. I used to love it. When I used to work with some telephony systems, a lot of their systems were based on Sybase IQ, which was a great platform. But yeah, Amazon and AWS was kind of the proving ground for early Snowflake. You had a lot of guys get pulled out of there. That was our very first business partner back then when we were at Snowflake, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. And they built an ecosystem. There's a gentleman named Ken Chestnut that you and I both know. And Ken, I give him a lot of credit for building a data ecosystem around the tools that AWS had, and really introducing a lot of the partners to each other to create what we would now call the modern data stack.
Exactly. Yes. And the modern data stack is what really attracted me and brought me into this world. Obviously, I have been looking at Snowflake for a couple of years before I met you, Todd. What intrigued me the most is that there were things that it could do that, I just couldn't do with traditional roast stores. I mean, one of the things that was intriguing was the drop and undrop. That's the thing that kind of blew my mind. When you gave me the initial pitch, you were like, man, watch this thing go. You know, I can literally drop a table and then resurrect it as if it never left. And I was like, wow, that's amazing, right? I mean, a tribute to Benoit and Thierry's architecture, you know what I'm saying? But it really intrigued me, right? How about you?
Well, and that was it. So, you know, I was working at Amazon. I'd only been there a year and a half, and I enjoyed it. Unlike some people at Amazon who struggle, I was really enjoying myself. And I got a call from a recruiter that just sounded a little too good to be true. So I'm like, okay, I'll take a demo. It was given by Steve Herskovitz, and it's exactly what you saw in the demo. And really, yeah, it came from a team that knew databases and understood cloud, and really had built something that was unique.
Yeah. That was awesome, man. I tell you, man. But yeah, the modern data stack is something that's offered a lot of businesses the ability to kind of, you know, work with their data in a new way, moving specifically away from, you know, a CapEx model, moving more into an OpEx model, which, I mean, quite frankly, I think it's a good thing. I remember, you know, when we were buying big boxes back in the day, deploying them in a data center. Sometimes you'd have some that just would collect dust, and that's kind of like a sunk cost model. And if you didn't use it, you know, you were going to lose it. With the modern data stack, which is interesting, sometimes if you use it, you could lose it because, you know, the bills could go kind of insane. But, you know, the modern data stack has allowed you to kind of do things in a sort of a utility model or utility-based billing model. But again, like what happens is with great power comes great responsibility, right? I mean, you know, a lot of these cloud architectures allow people to do things that they wouldn't typically do in a traditional system. And you can see yourselves run into a big bill. I'll give you a couple examples here. You know, one thing that it was interesting to me, I saw this recently when I was going through Medium, and I saw a guy post an article around BigQuery's ridiculous pricing. I'm like, okay, whatever you say. But, you know, they had a 22-second query that literally cost them $10,000 in just 22 seconds, which is absurd, right? You see this one, a guy says, hey, I tried to roll out Microsoft Fabric, ended up rolling straight into a $20K a month bill, right? I mean, this is interesting, right? You know, there's a common theme here. We'll talk a little bit about that. Here's another one. You know, hey, how not to run a $12,000 query on Snowflake, right? So there's people that are publishing this information because obviously there's an issue there that people run into pretty often where they'll overspend. Lastly, here's one that was interesting. Hey, I racked up a big a cloud bill, and then the guy, you know, that was talking about it says, hey, I found that there was a default cluster inactivity timeout on, right? So it's like, wait, there's all these configuration settings that you need to be responsible with in order not to get yourself a large cloud bill. So like I say before, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. It's not like these platforms don't give you the tools necessary to, you know, help you contain your costs. But a lot of businesses just don't. I mean, what's your take on that?
You know, it was
How do and why do some cloud computing bills just kind of go insane?
Yeah, and it's wild because obviously the providers have their own cost model, right? Snowflake and Databricks have they're built on top of clouds, and so they have a cost model. Now, how they share that with the customers a little bit different between the two, but at the end of the day, it's this usage-based model was designed with customers in mind. It was designed to say, hey, you don't have to spend $1 million up front, like you were talking about, with what we call the forklift upgrade, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I need compute, I can go get it right away. The challenge is, you know, as they try to put together these pricing models, and BigQuery is kind of unique. They were the first to market, but they kind of came out as a science experiment platform, and they said, well, hey, the best way to charge for, you know, our system is to charge by bytes processed. And, you know, suddenly when you take what was a science experiment and turn it into a business process that runs frequently, your cost model just doesn't line up. And you've got to have people that understand what the true cost model is in order to both design processes that are efficient and to prevent, put measures in place to prevent a user from blowing through $20,000 or $12,000 with a single query.
Yeah, yeah. You got to kind of know what you're working with, right? I mean, plain and simple. I mean, part of that could be a little bit of education, and part of that is, platform dynamics, actually really understanding what the platform does. I mean, quite frankly, you can get an upgrade and a new feature that's added to the cloud platforms at the drop of a hat, which requires you to kind of be ahead of the curve when it comes to knowing what's coming down the pike. So you need to stay kind of educated. Do you agree with that statement?
Oh,
Understand the
100%. And
platform.
that's a big part of what I'm doing at Revify.
Mhm.
I've kind of got a unique role. It's head of growth, but really what I do is, as a practitioner for many years, and also having sold Snowflake and supported a lot of partners on Snowflake, it's educating our customers on the platform and creating kind of this model of continuous education as these platforms evolve. There's some big changes coming, especially with AI. And the vendors do a good job of educating, but at the end of the day, that doesn't work for every organization. And we want to help those organizations not only see what's happening in their system, but understand how they can optimize.
Yeah, yeah. We're talking to Todd Beauchene of Revify about how to get the most out of your cloud spend, and specifically, why do some cloud computing bills kind of go insane? We had several examples that we showed earlier, and it's really intriguing. Like I remember when I first got into dynamic tables with Snowflake, I thought that was in my opinion, I wrote an article about it. You can find it on the Greenleaf website, but it's interesting. I thought it was kind of like what I would consider like game changing tech when it came out. I mean, be able to declaratively write an entire ETL pipeline without having to, old school mapping and, pulling data and transforming it before you actually landed into your architecture was intriguing to me. But interestingly enough, you got to know what you're doing. I've seen people try to run dynamic tables in a way that increases the amount of fail-safe in Snowflake that they're leveraging. A lot of times folks don't understand this, but if you architect it incorrectly, that's what you're going to end up with. Storage inside of any cloud platform is become a commodity, right? You don't
Oh,
want to
definitely.
overpay for that, right? You don't want to overpay for that. If you don't understand what you're doing and you're, unintendedly kind of increasing your cloud spend, and there's something wrong with what you're doing, and that requires an education.
Yeah. I mean, you have unlimited storage. Snowflake doesn't say this account only comes with a terabyte of storage.
Yeah,
And neither do any of the other platforms. You can create, and you mentioned failsafe is a very special feature for Snowflake that's amazing. It's what makes time travel and undrop possible. It's
yeah,
great.
exactly.
But if you don't understand how it works, then it can again become an infinite cost.
Exactly. Yeah. So education is one way to kind of understand, or to understand how you can control your cost containment. It's interesting. Snowflake, knew that there was an issue with, folks trying to understand, how do I optimize my spend? There's tons of businesses that set themselves up. Revify being one. And there's Select.dev, who came out with their cost optimization tool. NTT Data has one where they have a cost optimization tool. There's just a lot of companies out here who are building these optimization platforms because they realize that folks just don't understand kind of what they're working with. One thing I did want to know is how can businesses honestly derive value from their cloud spend, in a way that justifies what they're spending. So in other words, make the juice worth the squeeze. What
That
can they do to make the juice worth the squeeze?
Definitely an issue. So I started at Amazon, and my first day I was reporting to a product manager. So I wasn't even reporting to a technical person. And they put a 3-inch stack of papers on my desk that
Wow.
were all research about the industry, obviously retail, right? So
Mhm.
we were dealing with mobile retail and the job that I had and trying to get people to buy things on any device that wasn't a PC.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's all kinds of interesting research out there. But at the end of the day, it comes down to business questions. And can you answer the questions that the business is asking? And I think too often data leaders answer based on what's possible in their mind and not what's best for the business. And I think you could store all the data you want about somebody accessing your website, but if you can't tell a story about how that drives either a purchase or some desired activity, then you've really wasted everybody's time. And it's really, as you get to understand the platform, then you can architect the data to match the business questions that are being asked.
Yeah, indeed. Hey, going back to this one, BigQuery's ridiculous pricing, right? It says, hey, $10,000 in just 22 seconds. Now imagine if that 22 seconds resulted in, $250 million worth of revenue. I mean, now if you tied that 22-second query that cost you $10,000 to an outcome that was positive, then it makes sense. Now, again, if you netted, minus $10,000 for this transaction, then that's where the problem comes in. You agree?
Oh yeah, no, it's 100%. We used we used the cloud data system at Amazon to get fraud detection, and that was huge. Like we could save, those queries were definitely worth it, and that system costs a lot to run. Not $20,000 in a couple of seconds, but there was definitely cost to it. And again, it's really understanding. I was looking at another online vendor, and they were saying they were able to cut fraud in half with AI. Right. And so immediately you say, hey, fraud is costing us several $1 million a year. I'm now willing to invest at least that much into a fraud detection system that operates. And it's really just understanding those levers so that you don't accidentally, and that's the big problem with these stories, is it's an accidental spend.
Right.
And again, that comes from education and having alerting in place to stop that from happening.
That's true. Understood. It's interesting. You talk about business value. Like I had a good friend and I had a conversation last week who's been doing a lot of RPA. And specifically now with like agentic AI and a lot of AI agents that have been, being deployed in a lot of businesses, businesses are enabling themselves to, kind of slow down hiring, right? If you look at like the macro environment now with a lot of uncertainty, businesses are trying to cut back on spend or worrying about where they're going to spend their next dollar because they just don't know what the future looks like. But if you could somehow contain your ability, or if you can scale, right, your business and scale revenue and drive additional revenue without adding additional headcount, that's a positive, right? That's
it's huge.
That's positive. Yeah.
And I think, when it comes down to it, that's really what the cloud enables is, and again, we're not trying to replace people with computers. A lot of times it's a co-pilot model where we're making your current employees more efficient.
Yes.
You talk about dynamic tables. I've been in organizations that had whole teams running ETL pipelines, and now between features like dynamic tables, and I was just looking at another system that you're seeing a lot of ETL being generated by AI. It's again, you need a person there to watch over and make sure that nothing goes wrong, but it can make an employee. And the other thing about this, and that's what we've always pointed out with Snowflake, is it makes your job better. It's not taking away the fun part of your job. It's taking away the drudgery that exists within your job and letting you focus on the fun part.
Again, making the juice really worth the squeeze, which is what I say. And I mean, because look, there's going to be an associated cost no matter what in a utility model. Again, and you don't, sometimes it could be literally indeterminate, right? It's like you said, there's an infinite pool of compute. There's an infinite pool of storage that you can leverage, right? But you want to leverage it to your benefit, right? Leverage it towards something that's going to drive a significant return on that investment.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I was dealing with a customer just yesterday, And, they were running a data pipeline that did a lot of updates and merges.
Mm-hmm.
And when you looked at their query history, you saw most of their really expensive queries fell into one of those two categories.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I spent a ton of time at Snowflake teaching customers how to avoid that, the need for merging and updating, by just tweaking your storage model a little bit and letting Snowflake's efficient query side pruning take care of a large data set. And the fact that the data is so cheap to store, if you get the algorithm correct, that you can eliminate some of these very costly pieces by planning smartly, and again, focusing on the data that's most important.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Another thing, I mean, as an unintended consequence of being able to, store all that data now, you know, what's much more appealing is sending the work to the data. I mean, there's something to be said about that, right? I remember back in the day, I used to pull data from a SQL-based database. You got to add it to something like SPSS or Enterprise Guide, and you had to slim your data set down to a tiniest small data set in order to run an inference model. Nowadays, you can literally train and infer directly in your cloud-based platform, and most of the platforms today are enabling this by implementing large language models and different types of modeling directly in the platforms. And this is an exciting time if you're in data.
Oh, very much so. And again, another thing you have to watch, because those LLMs will consume tokens very, very quickly.
Quickly, yes.
And
Yes.
it's a little tricky because the token cost is actually really small. And so I can burn through 1 million tokens and it doesn't really hurt me. Well, computers are really fast, and maybe they're going to burn through 100 million tokens in that amount of time. So it's really just important to understand what you're working with.
Yeah, and education is the key. So, we talked a little bit about Revify. Can you explain to us about what Revify is doing and how can Revify help in this category?
So our founders were also founders at ThoughtSpot, which is where I worked and where I got to know them a little bit. And they were just looking at these cloud data platforms, and specifically Snowflake. And they felt like there was a lot of automation that could be done to optimize things like warehouse sizing, and that, customers understand kind of the cost model now, but they don't really understand how you can play with those settings in order to kind of optimize that. And that was really the goal. And on top of that, then the goal was to add data quality and data observability to the puzzle to create a complete solution that understands each of these platforms and how they operate. It does some alerting, to be honest, to help customers avoid these cost overruns. But mostly it's really about understanding how your system is working. If you've got a data pipeline, how efficient is it? How reliable is it? And ultimately, the other side that we focus on then is we pair up that cost data of populating the tables with the usage statistics. So if I'm spending a bunch of money to populate a table and I can't get the value out of it because no one's looking at it, that's a big problem. The other side is, if I've got a table that everybody's using that hasn't been updated in 6 months, and you'd be surprised how many customers have that situation, then I got an even almost worse problem of people using inaccurate or untimely data.
Oh yeah, that's a huge problem. As a matter of fact, I would call that the kind of the holy grail of negative problems, right? I mean, inaccurate data will cause you some serious challenges. You know what I'm saying? And then the bottom line is that it results in reputational harm, right? That you can't really get back. It's kind of an uphill journey to get through that. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was involved in the Fire Phone.
Yeah, you got
tangentially, thank heavens. And interestingly enough, for anybody who wonders, most of the technology that was in the Fire Phone ended up in Alexa. So Amazon didn't lose all that money, but they definitely took a reputational hit. And having been pulled in after the launch instead of before, it was very apparent to me that they had made some decisions missing data that actually was available to us at the time.
Yeah.
That could have changed the game. I don't know if it would have saved the Fire Phone, but maybe told us that it wasn't needed at that time.
Yeah. It is truly remarkable how an ounce of prevention really does equal a pound of cure. I mean, it's like, as cliche as it is, just be upfront and know what you're dealing with, specifically in the space that we're in, because we're known as trusted advisors. And again, you can really mess your reputation up. So awesome. Todd, anything else you want to leave folks with before we close off?
Well, really, with what we've been referred to previously as digital transformation, we're now getting data from everywhere.
Yeah.
And we have, as I mentioned, unlimited essentially storage. And you've got vendors like AWS out there saying, hey, take all your data and back it up. And they have different tiers. And as you get into this world where you can answer really any question in relation to your business, it becomes essential that as a data leader, you lean in on your relationship with the business and then use tools like a Revify or, some of the built-in tools that these platforms have to help you manage more effectively, but never give up the focus on, what is the business value of this data and how do I tie that ROI to the cost? Because again, the cost can be big. And what we're really trying to avoid is surprises.
Right.
It's not about don't spend that much money on data. Obviously, you don't want to spend money you don't have, but find a budget that works and identify and data can have immense value for it's how Amazon is beating the brick and mortar retailers. It's how companies like Uber took out taxis,
Right.
Data can win a lot of business battles if it's used properly.
Yeah, exactly. And CFOs really love predictability, Todd. I mean,
Oh yeah.
you don't want to surprise them. I mean, again, like I said before, whereas the sunk cost model was if you don't lose it, you'll use it. But in a utility model, if you use it, you could potentially lose it. You need to be really careful about how you leverage these modern data stack platforms.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, this is great, man. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I mean, we don't talk nearly enough as we used to. I mean, Todd, we used to spend days together, right? And dinners together, and and I miss those days. But it's always a pleasure getting a chance to talk to you, man.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you. We had the biggest challenge, I think, of all people at Snowflake. Not to say that the engineers weren't the bigger reason, but like we had to teach all of these people at the partners who knew data warehousing from Exadata and Teradata, and we had to teach them a whole new model.
It's crazy.
And I'll tell you, you and I both had stories. We were always collaborating on the challenges we face. So, it's great to get together and talk about how this has evolved over time.
Yeah, those were fun times too. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of resources that we trained. I mean, it's unbelievable. Early on, I mean, we were the first ones doing it. I mean, yeah, look, we remember I was on LinkedIn not long ago, and I posted a statement about us having the very first partner certification exam. I don't know if I really want to call that a certification exam, but it was what we had at the time, Todd, is what we did.
We were moving fast and furious. So we did what we could to try to put some kind of a barrier to understand, like, how do you assess somebody's understanding of these principles that we've been talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Which is key. Yeah. So always a pleasure, my friend. I'm going to let you go. And it's good seeing you.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks so much for bringing me on.
Awesome. That was Todd Beauchene of Revify. He's the head of growth at Revify, a cloud optimization and a spend optimization platform. That wraps up this session on maximizing cloud data value without breaking your budget. We hope you enjoyed this segment and get some value from it. Greenleaf is at the ready to assist businesses in maximizing the value of their cloud investment. We have decades of experience and can not only tell you, as we've done here today, but can show you as well. For more information, you can follow us on LinkedIn or visit our website at www.greenleafgroup.com. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.